Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're really getting into the weeds, tracing the incredibly complex causal chains that link our gut's microbial ecology directly to our systemic metabolic health and, ultimately, our longevity. Now, we aren't just treating the human body as a bunch of isolated parts, right? It's a single, interconnected biological system. So we're going to construct an ever-expanding map of knowledge to understand exactly how the molecular structure of what we eat literally dictates our energy regulation, our inflammation levels, and even cellular aging. Let's get right into it. Okay, so here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the gut metabolism axis, then decode the biotic lexicon. From there, we'll hit prebiotic fermentation kinetics, check out the SCFA signaling cascade, dive into targeted symbiotic therapies, and wrap things up with some really fascinating variables and unanswered questions. We're going straight for the mechanisms, the modifiers, and those absolutely crucial biological feedback loops. All right, section 1. The gut metabolism axis. To kick things off, we really have to shift our perspective. We need to understand that the gut actually acts as a highly specialized endocrine organ, one that is just seamlessly integrated with our entire systemic metabolism. We're not just digesting food here. We're engaging in a constant, real-time molecular dialogue. Let's look at this top-down causal map. It illustrates perfectly how ingesting specific polymerized fibers essentially dictates which microbes thrive. That's steps 1 and 2. Step 3 is the production of short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs. And then step 4, well, that's where the magic really happens, systemic endocrine signaling. This entire chain eventually triggers downstream GLP-1 secretion, which, as you know, is a massive player in appetite regulation and manages systemic insulin. So the huge takeaway here is that your food selection directly alters your microbiome, which immediately alters your metabolism and body composition. It's a total feedback loop. Moving on to section 2, decoding the biotic lexicon. Now, if we want to maintain real scientific rigor here, we've got to ditch the vague wellness buzzwords and establish a precise, evidence-based clinical vocabulary. Because when you're mapping out biological networks, language really matters. Take the word probiotic, for instance. According to the scientific consensus from ISOP, a microbial strain absolutely cannot be classified as a probiotic unless its efficacy has been proven in a randomized controlled trial, period. We're talking about highly specific clinical interventions defined at the strain level through genome sequencing. We don't guess in precision medicine, we prove the health benefit. And this brings up a really stark contrast between culinary arts and precision medicine. Listen, fermented foods are fantastic. We all love them, and they provide great bioactive compounds. But we cannot assume they have the exact same strain-specific therapeutic utility as a clinically validated probiotic. Why? Because fermented foods have absolutely no strict requirement to contain living microbes right at the moment you eat them, nor do they have to actually prove a specific health benefit. We really have to separate broad, everyday dietary traditions from targeted medical therapies. All right, section 3, prebiotic fermentation kinetics. Let's zoom way in on the physical molecular structures of the prebiotics that actually feed these microbial populations. Basically, we're looking at the fuel. By analyzing something called the degree of polymerization, or DP for short, we can see exactly how a fiber's chain length dictates its biological behavior. For example, inulin has a long chain, meaning a DP of 10 or more. This allows it to resist rapid breakdown and ferment much slower, further down in the distal colon. On the flip side, fructooligosaccharides, or FOS, have shorter chains, so they ferment super fast right in the proximal colon. And then you have xylooligosaccharides, or XOS, which feature these highly stable beta-1,4 linkages that resist that early breakdown. It perfectly proves the rule: structure dictates function. And a recent double-blind investigation confirmed exactly this. These distinct fermentation kinetics actually lead to completely divergent metabolic outcomes, and it heavily depends on the host space metabolic status. So, for overweight subjects, inulin actively managed glycemic dysregulation by significantly decreasing the glucose and insulin area under the curve, meaning fewer total spikes over time. Now, FOS didn't improve glycemic control, but it did reduce homocysteine, which points to a clear cardiovascular benefit. So, we really can't just treat fiber as this one monolithic entity. Now take a look at the specific efficiency of XOS. Just 1.4 grams. That is remarkably efficient. Doses as incredibly low as 1.4 grams per day selectively feed the beneficial bifidobacterium. And why is this a game changer? Because it does all of this without the adverse gas and bloating you normally get with larger fructans like indulin. It is a highly targeted, low-dose intervention. So, the absolutely crucial point to remember here is that manipulating the exact biochemical structure of the fiber you eat gives you targeted control over the resulting biological feedback loop. You're basically programming your inner ecosystem. Fiber structure dictates the microbes, and the microbes dictate the metabolic output. On to section 4, the SCFA signaling cascade. Let's actually follow those microbial metabolites, those short-chain fatty acids, as they cross over the intestinal barrier and enter systemic circulation. These SCFAs, particularly butyrate and propionate, don't just hang around in the gut. They are active systemic signaling molecules. They fuel colonocytes, modulate mucosal immune signaling, and even influence hepatic lipid metabolism. They are constantly communicating with your liver, your brain, and your fat cells. They're a fantastic complementary strategy for enhancing glucose homeostasis and alleviating inflammation. But remember, we never treat a conclusion as an endpoint, right? We've got to continuously poke holes in our models. And that brings up a highly debated question in physiology right now. When it comes to the SCFA propionate, does it heal or does it actually harm? We'll look at this incredibly contradictory evidence. In rodent models, propionate looks like a superstar. It stimulates GLP-1 and PYY, those are your key satiety hormones, which suppresses appetite and acts as a major anti-obesity factor. But conversely, human clinical trials show it can actually trigger sympathetic nervous system activation, spiking glucagon and driving insulin resistance. It's wild. We really have to investigate these methodological limitations because these contradictions strongly suggest that propionate's true efficacy is tightly constrained by hidden host variables and specific dietary contexts. What works miracles in a mouse might literally trigger a stress response in a human, all depending on their baseline ecology. Which brings us to Section 5, Targeted Symbiotic Therapies. To harness all this immense complexity, researchers are now engineering specific clinical pairings called symbiotics. This is where we deliberately combine the specific fuel with the specific engine. Understanding the difference between a complementary and a synergistic paradigm is a big deal here. A complementary symbiotic is basically just a really good probiotic and a really good prebiotic taken at the same time. They work independently. But a synergistic symbiotic, that is a masterclass in bioengineering. The prebiotic substrate is selectively designed to be utilized strictly by the specific microorganism it's co-administered with. It essentially guarantees that the microbe has its exact preferred food source so it can thrive and produce a precise metabolic output. And what happens when these targeted therapies actually succeed? Well, by tracking the immunological signaling cascades, we see clinically validated strains doing amazing things. They physically restore tight junction integrity. They act like bouncers, crowding out pathogens. They lower the luminal gut pH. They even downregulate TLR4 expression to shut off the NF-kappa B inflammatory alarm system. And they actively train your immune system by directing naive T cells to become regulatory Tregs, which are basically the peacekeepers of your immune response. This isn't just passive health, it's the active cellular suppression of destructive inflammation. But of course, there are always trade-offs. Look at these constraints between dosage requirements and gastrointestinal tolerability. To get the maximum studied benefit from inulin, you might need up to 15 grams a day. For someone with a sensitive gut, that is going to trigger immense gas and bloating. FOS needs about 10 grams. But look at XOS again. It hits its maximum studied optimal dosage at just 2.8 grams. That efficiency really matters when we're trying to translate this science into sustainable, everyday lifestyle habits. Finally, Section 6, Variables and Unanswered Questions. As I always say, we never treat a conclusion as an endpoint, so we must identify the unresolved controversies that are mapping out the entire future of this field. The real secret here lies in hidden variables. You could have two people take the exact same prebiotic, and they will output completely different levels of short-chain fatty acids. Why? Because of their baseline Bacteroides to bifidobacterium ratios. We are just now beginning to uncover how your initial microbiome ecology, which we can identify through advanced genetic sequencing tools like PICRIST analysis, completely alters your capacity to upregulate vital antioxidant pathways like glutathione and folate metabolism. Literally, your current microbiome dictates your future capacity to heal. So as we keep expanding our map of knowledge, it leaves us with a massive question. How will personalized metagenomics and individual SCFA profiling redefine the future of precision metabolic care? We are standing at the absolute precipice of a revolution where your specific, unique microbial blueprint determines your exact metabolic interventions.
What is your personalized blueprint going to reveal? Thank you so much for exploring the complex systems of your biology with me today. Keep questioning, keep investigating, and I will see you in the next explainer.